Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the video that's going to be just a little cringy tonight. We're going to be looking at something that is a little troubling, more than a little troubling, actually. But the primary point is to look at this and say, okay, so youth ministry, youth pastors, all of that sort of stuff. Like, what do we do with it? So the first thing I want to pull up. Okay, and I will include this link in the description after this live's over. I'll put that link in the description when it's over. So let's go ahead and pull some of this up really quick. There was a thread today on it was on Twitter is where it was. And the thread was basically went viral pretty quick. I saw it early this morning, probably like 4 or 5 a.m. And by the time it hit this afternoon, there was a lot of people that were looking at it. And it was this image right... Oh, hold on a second. This image right here. And this was from Twitter. And it was somebody that posted it. And it was a sticker that their daughter had gotten at youth group the previous week. And it just says this: any other moms have a teenager that goes to the church on the actual Twitter post, the church was blocked out. In Greer, the youth pastor gave my younger sister, 14 years old, and other students this sticker during midweek last night. He's 35 years old. This made her very uncomfortable, as it clearly should have. It says, "I love hot youth pastors." Why anybody would have ever thought that was a good idea, I do not know. So as it progressed throughout the day, this Twitter feed has gone pretty viral. I shared it I retweeted it on my Twitter feed, so you can go check out and go look through all of the comments there, but it pretty much caught fire. And then later this afternoon, someone apparently got a hold of some of the communication between the church, I think the original communication was actually this one. Now, again, this is posted in the feed, so I did not get this from anybody like on the back channels or anything like that. This was posted on the actual Twitter feed. And this is apparently the message that that the youth pastor, as far as I can tell, sent to the person that made the original post. And basically it says, "Last night I was made aware of your concerns involving the sticker being distributed to your sister at midweek. Let me assure you that my intentions were pure, and the last thing I wanted to do was make your sister, or anyone that attended feel uncomfortable. We're updating our church's database, and I encouraged kids to come see me to get a sticker, and update their information. The sticker was meant to poke fun at, quote, I love hot mom, unquote, culture. In hindsight, the joke was a very poor taste and a mistake on my part. I do apologize for their distribution." So there, it seems to be more than just one sticker. And it seems to be maybe he made the sticker. The youth pastor made the sticker. We don't know. I don't know at this point. But if he did make the sticker, that's a little bit more disturbing. I could not find that sticker that was on the original post. This sticker here, could not find it anywhere online, which makes me think that maybe the youth pastor made the sticker and passed it out. So anyway, it goes on to say, one of our top goals at, I guess now everybody knows what they didn't block out the church. Fairview students is to create a safe place for students. Last night we fell short. Please accept my apologies. If you have any more questions, you can contact directly with his contact information was cut off. My understanding at this point, by the way, is that the church has actually blocked their, or not blocked, they've privated their Facebook or Instagram account. And then this email here was from apparently the pastor, as far as I can tell. The youth pastor's name is Corey. You're going to see that in here. But this was a message sent out, my understanding is, to at least the person that originally posted about their concern, or maybe the whole church. It says this: "We see you and hear your concerns and affirm the matter has been taken seriously. I cannot comment on our accountability actions with Corey because it is a personnel that cannot be discussed publicly. I will confirm the leadership and Corey understand the severity of the incident and we have addressed it with him. He is meeting with his leaders to discuss the mistake he made and that it is in very poor taste. I will confirm that this has been dealt with as a serious matter in our response with Corey privately according to our personal manual guidelines. Corey's mentioning, quote, having a porn addiction, unquote, was about at a time when he was a high schooler and a young adult. We were aware of this in his testimony, and when we interviewed him. When he mentioned this to one of the students, it was during the summer, and it was brought to our attention. We met with Corey, and he understands this should not have been shared with the students until he made parents aware of the topic beforehand and explained the context of why he would share this with his testimony. This was discussed, and our leadership handled it accordingly to our personnel manual guidelines. If you have any more comment or questions, please contact us. So that's basically the breakdown of what's been happening with this particular Twitter thread. Now, I just bring that up because it's one of those things that you read through those messages. First of all, I think everyone can agree. Like, nobody on the thread is like, oh, I totally get why he did that. Nobody is in that, because everybody knows that that was an absolutely stupid decision to make. First of all, if he made the stickers, it was even a dumber decision to make. And it brings us to this whole youth pastor sort of culture, and what pretty much gets brought up a lot whenever youth pastors are involved, and usually it's not stuff good. For example, somebody else shared this week. Let me pull this up real quick. I've disappeared. Oh no. Okay, I'm back. So somebody brought this up this last week, and it's basically a Fox 4 investigation, 14 girls abused by North Texas youth pastor, red flags, and church ignored. This whole article is available as well. I'll put that in the description below after the live as well. Basically, the short story on this is this guy worked at Denton Bible Church in Texas. There was a lot of allegations brought up. None of them apparently were taken very seriously at the time. And 14 girls ended up being abused because of that. And that's just another example of basically when people, for example, see that sticker at the beginning, and then we get to, this story here, it's not like a far stretch to be like, oh, okay, I see where people are coming from. I see the concern, right? That's a big deal. Now, it brings me to the whole topic of like, what about youth ministry then, right? You're going to have a bunch of people have a bunch of different opinions about youth ministry. And unfortunately, youth ministries typically are just not handled well. So let me lay out kind of tonight, my take on youth ministry. I am the honest youth pastor after all, and people make assumptions based on that name all the time about my kind of feelings toward youth ministry in general. Now, let's lay it out and go to the Bible primarily, okay? So one of the things you should base everything on is Scripture. So in Scripture, we have qualifications for elders. Now, people often bring up all the time that youth pastor is not a position mentioned in the Bible, and I 100% agree. We're not going to go into it in this video, but youth ministry, children's ministries all came out of not actually even that long ago, the need for taking care of basically orphan children or uneducated children or uncared for children. Churches started, I forget the guy's name, maybe we'll do a video on one day. Basically, they decided that, hey, I want to help these kids. We're going to educate them and also in the church as well as teaching them about the Bible. So children's ministry, youth ministry, young adult ministry basically started that way, and it didn't really catch on until about the 1800s. And the idea of bringing all the kids together and breaking the church into segregated age groups and teaching them that way. Before then, the idea was that parents, Christian parents, would teach their own children about the Bible. They would bring them up in admonition of the Lord. They would catechize their children, which is just a big word for teaching them the Bible. So when we start talking about youth pastors and the modern day idea of youth ministry, one of the things we need to keep in mind so that the things that we just looked at don't happen, or at least they're preventative measures to make sure they don't happen, is that we don't put people in positions that aren't qualified elders. Now, I have an entire video on eldership and what that looks like and the different models of it throughout the church. I will also link that in the description below after this live, so you can watch it on the replay, or you'll have the link on the replay. But the idea is that there are pretty strict structures for what this looks like. Now, we're going to look at the three main passages that pastoral qualifications are always drawn from, and we're going to look at why these are important for anybody that is over a ministry. So if you insist on having a youth ministry at your church, and by youth ministry, I mean a place where all of the kids, regardless if they have Christian parents or not Christian parents, come and learn the Bible, whoever is over that, leading that, teaching that, should be, by qualification, an elder within the church. They should fit these qualifications. If you insist on doing that, it can't just be the guy that happens to be 3, 4, 5 years older than the people he's over. It should actually be someone that fits the qualifications of elder. And there's a reason for that, right? So let's read. The first place we're going to go is 1 Peter chapter 5. Now, I don't have this pulled up on the screen. You're going to have to, actually here, I bet I can do that real quick. Hold on. I'm going to pull that up so we can have that on the screen. And we can read this through this together. I wasn't prepared for this, but we can do it really quick. All right, let me click through here and get to this passage for you. So if you do have your Bible and you just want to go there and you don't want to look at the screen, we're going to go to 1 Peter chapter 5 is the first place we're going to go, okay? 1 Peter chapter 5. Let me pull the screen up for you. So on 1 Peter chapter 5, what we're going to see here is verses 1 through 4. So it says this: "So I exhort the elders among you as fellow elders and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight." All right, so here we go. We're shepherding the flock. We're exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you. You're wanting to do this thing, not for shameful gain, but eagerly. So not for the money, but because you want to. Not demeaning over those in your charge, but being an example for the flock. You are not the guy with the whip. You are the guy out here living as the example of what people should be able to follow after. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive an unfading crown of glory. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to your elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Okay, so here we go. So an elder, a shepherd, Peter is writing to the fellow elders there, that they are to do what? They are to exercise oversight over those in their care. They're not to do it because they have to. They're supposed to do it because they want to. And so they're not going to be greedy for gain and money, but they're going to do so eagerly. They want to serve God's people that God has put under, like, for them to do. And they're not supposed to do it, domineering over them. You have to follow me. You have to listen to me. They're supposed to be out there setting the example. What is the congregation should be able to look towards the elders and say, how should I act in given situations? What example is in front of me? And it should be the elders. And the reason that there's qualifications for the elders that we'll look at in a minute is because of that. The congregation should be able to look at the elders and say, that's who I want to model myself after. That's who I want to, like, if I need an example of what does it look like to live as a believer of Jesus in difficult situations, they should be able to look toward the pastors. And it says, not domineering, but as example. And then he says, when the chief shepherd comes, you are going to get a reward. Okay. So the next passages we're going to go to, I know this is all probably very common to a lot of you. I really don't care. We have to read these so that we can just bury it in your brain, because if you don't, nonsense like we saw at the beginning of this video happens. You have somebody that's not, well, here, we'll see in a minute. Go to Titus chapter 1, and we're going to be reading verses 5. Let me look at something here real quick, see if I can, I'm going to try to make this bigger for you. There we go. All right, we're going to do that. So we're going to go to Titus chapter 1. Well, that didn't really work, but whatever. Okay, Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. Okay, this is the qualifications for elders. Paul writing to Titus says this. This is why I left you in Crete. Why? So that you might put what remains in order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. Now, there's going to be people that disagree with this. Again, I don't care. He tells him to put elders in every town. It is not supposed to be one guy in charge of all this stuff. Elders. More than one. Why? Why do you think that's important? Well, one, probably because there's a lot of people there and one guy cannot pastor all those people, cannot know all their needs, cannot be able to be there when everybody needs them. There are elders in charge over the flock, right? Put in charge elders, more than one. There's somebody to keep, they're there to keep each other in check. They're there to pray for one another. They're there to bear one another's burdens as elders, because that's a pretty heavy burden. So appoint elders in every town. Now, what are those elders supposed to do? Well, if anyone is above reproach, okay, you are above reproach. That means nobody questions your integrity. You don't give anybody a reason to question your integrity. You go above and beyond to make sure you are above reproach. The husband of one wife. Okay, there you go. So it's a man. I know you guys are going to disagree, but let's keep going. And his children are believers. We're going to see this in Timothy too. Now, I'll be really honest with you. I'll be really honest with you before we go any further. For a long time, I thought, does this like outright say that single men can't be an elder? And I get it. I don't think that that it outright excludes single guys. Paul, for example, planted a lot of churches. We don't know really anything about Timothy or Titus, if they were married or not. I don't think we do. Maybe I'm blanking here, but we don't know. Obviously, Jesus was single, right? But I think here in Titus and Timothy, Paul mentions, let me see here. So let me pull this up. So I think he mentions, and his children are believers for a reason. And I go into that reason in the eldership video. You can watch that one. It's a really long video, but I break all this down. But he mentions a husband of one wife, and his children are believers. So why does the man need to be married and have children that are believers? Well, we'll see a little bit more of that in Timothy. But the idea here is that he is able to run his home well, because a church is very much like a family as well, that you're going to have to be able to manage the stress of, know how to love and care and direct people. And that starts at home. And then he goes, his children must be believers and not open to any charge of debauchery or insubordination. So so the man can be disqualified by his own children if they are open to charge of debauchery or insubordination. And that seems odd to us, right? We're like, wow, that's his kids. Why is he open for, disqualification if his kids are open for debauchery or insubordination? Because if he can't run his household well, if he can't run his household well, how is he going to run the church well? Right? Verse 7, for an overseer as God's steward must be above reproach. Okay, so now we're moving on from his family. We'll see a little bit more of that in Timothy, but let's move on. Verse 7, for an overseer as God's steward must be above reproach. Okay, copying what we see over in Peter. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain, right? So he can't, he's got to be humble. We already saw that in 1 Peter. He's got to be humble. He's got to be self-controlled. We see that in a little bit, but even that quick-tempered is self-control. Control over oneself, right? He's not quick-tempered. He doesn't lose it. Why? Because there's going to be times where you are very tempted to lose it. He has to be humble and not quick-tempered, and he can't be a drunkard. He's got to have control over himself. He can't be violent. He's got to be kind, right? And he can't be greedy for gain. That's a big one. We're going to see that in every single one of these passages. Can't be greedy for gain. Why? Because if you're greedy for gain, you're probably going to do things that aren't above board in order to have that money. And you're going to say things that aren't biblical so you can have that money. I think we have examples of that. We won't get into those now. He must be hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, right? Set apart, and disciplined, right? So these things right here. So when we look at, he must be self-controlled, he must be upright, he must be self-controlled, he must be disciplined, right? When we look at those characteristics, but then you look at the nonsense with the sticker that we saw at the beginning, right? That doesn't fit. Why? Well, because there's a maturity level there that is not usually expected of a youth pastor. Let's just be really real quick. One of my biggest, just things that grind my gears, man, they just grind my gears, is that we hire youth pastors, we as in the church, Big C Church, that are relatable, that are like way goofier than most other of the guys that, are doing things in the church, that are known to be the fun, the very energetic people. Nothing's wrong with being fun and energetic. But usually with youth, you don't usually attribute youth with self-controlled or arrogant or disciplined. But these are the qualifications of an elder, that the ones that lead the church, right? So here again, in case you guys are coming in late, a youth pastor, in my opinion, biblically has to be an elder. He's leading people through the scriptures. He's teaching the scriptures. So if you're going to have somebody in that official capacity, right, should be an elder. No question. No question at all. I mean, do we need more examples? I could pull up the article of the guy that abused 14 girls. We could do that. Or I could pull up that silly sticker again, right? I mean, do we really want to argue if they should be disciplined? Because clearly discipline's a big thing. So let's go back to the scriptures here. Verse 9, we're going to be right here. He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine, and also to rebuke those who contradict it. That's a huge one. Now, let me just say really quick, there are some youth pastors out there that are legit, right? They know doctrine, they can teach doctrine, their apologetic game is on point, okay? They do it well, right? So not every youth pastor doesn't fit the eldership qualifications. There's a lot of them that do. I'm just saying that if we want to nip this in the bud, where people are handing out stickers that say "I love hot youth pastors," maybe we need to really hold to these qualifications a little bit better, because we typically don't. Let's just be honest about that, right? Especially in mid-sized to small-sized churches, if you can fill the seats and get kids excited and get them in there singing. It's not true for everywhere, but it is true for some places. So anyway, there are the qualifications, right? Is that you got self-controlled, you're disciplined, able to teach sound doctrine. He's got a wife, he's got kids. Those kids are obedient, right? Anyway, so let's go to this last passage. If you want to pull it up really quick, we are going to go to 1 Timothy chapter 3. If you're still with me, thank you. I know these things make people upset sometimes. So let's go ahead. 1 Timothy chapter 3 says this, 1 through 7 is the scriptures we're looking at. This saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to be to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Okay, noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach. Do we see a theme here? Right? In 1 Peter, in Titus, in Timothy. If you are going to lead, you have to be above reproach. Why? Well, that's a silly question, isn't it? Because if you're above reproach, the logic kind of, rolls downhill here, that you're not going to pass out stickers that say "I love hot youth pastors." You're not going to say nonsensical things. You're not going to be immature. Okay? And for that to be an oversight, usually, and let's just be honest, usually that comes from maturity. And maturity comes from getting older and being through situations. I'm not saying that there's an age requirement for youth ministry, though we did do that live. I'll post that in the description below as well. We had a Youth Pastor Tuesday Night Live where we talked about that, because that's also important, that with age comes maturity, and some people are not mature enough at a young age to actually lead. They're just not. And they don't fit these qualifications. And if you don't fit these qualifications, you can't be an elder. Anyway, verse 2, therefore, an overseer must be above reproach. Here we go again with the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. All right, so these are all things that throughout all of these verses, we keep seeing that these are qualities that those that lead the church, the elders, these that lead the church, must have. You can't be in the position unless you have these qualities. This is also why when he tells Titus, for example, to appoint elders, and he says, this is what you need to look for. You need to look for men that have these characteristics, and those are the ones that you appoint as elders. And don't skimp on it. Don't be like, well, he's got, he's kind of trustworthy. No, like he has to be trustworthy. Now, this is where it goes into verse 4. He must manage his own household well. Why? Well, he must do it with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? Like let's just be honest. We do not take that verse seriously. We don't. Because if we did, right? And this goes, like, again, I've lost half of you at the fact that an elder has to be a man. I get it. Like, half of you have already checked out on that probably, but there's a reason why, right? Because he's married, he has kids, he's able to manage his own household well. Again, we've discussed this. Like, we can go back and forth on if he has to be married and have kids, but what we see here is that there's something that is built within a man when he has a wife and has kids that actually teaches him how to lead the church well. Anyway, let's keep going. 4, if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for the household of God? That's a fair question. Verse 6, he must not be a recent convert. Why? Well, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. That's a pretty big issue. That's not something to skim over. If he is a young or recent convert, he may become very puffed up. He may become arrogant, like he knows everything. He'll be in a cage stage, right? And he may fall into the condemnation of the devil. Verse 7, moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he may not fall into disgrace, into the snare of the devil. All right. So there's that. Now, again, my argumentation is that if you are going to lead any ministry within the church, like if you are going to be a pastor in the church that's overseeing the flock. Now, again, lead in any ministry, I need to clarify that term, I'm sure, because that means different things to different people. I'm saying that if you are going to lead the church, be involved in the decision-making process, doing the ministry part of it as far as being able to teach and lead the church and be the representative of the, like you are known as a leader of that church, right? These are the qualifications you're supposed to have. Now, there is one thing that I I missed in the 1 Peter passage, and I want to go back to that really quick. 1 Peter chapter 5. Now, the reason that these qualifications matter, in case like we haven't really, in case we haven't caught up yet, is because if these qualifications aren't met, the church is open to things like we saw in the article about the youth pastor abusing 14 girls, or it's open to somebody not having enough discernment to know that passing out a sticker that says, I love hot youth pastors, isn't a smart plan, right? One of the things that we see here in 1 Peter, well, where's it at? Yeah, so let's pull this up real quick. So it's going to be in verse 5, and it says this. It's going to be right here. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to your elders. Now, within the Greek here, basically what it's pulling up, like if you're going to pull apart the words, you who are younger could mean someone that is young, but is very much like leaning toward younger in the faith. You're like new to Christianity, right? And if you're new to Christianity, you're supposed to be subject to the elders. And elders not meaning the older people, but it's the same word that's used in verse 1. It's the same word that's used anytime fellow elders or elder is used within these verses, which basically means that Peter is instructing the new converts to be subject to those that are over them in leadership, in the eldership position, in the pastoral presbyter position. And when he instructs them to do that, to be subject to them, to obey them, he's doing so with this assumption that those that are over them are qualified, and in so being qualified, they are going to care for them and lead them and love them well. Because especially in the 1 Peter passage, the people that are leading them know that one day, who's going to show up? Jesus is going to show up, and you're going to have to give an account for the people you led and how you led them. And that should, as pastors, give them a little bit of more, like a little kick in the butt, right? Because you know that one day Jesus is going to show up and he's going to ask you what you were doing this whole time. Like, were you leading well? Were you self-controlled? Were you being dumb? Right? Jesus is showing up, pastor, and he's going to ask you how well you led your congregation. Did you teach them well? Or were you really more concerned about the money? Were you self-controlled? Or were you drunk all the time? Were you out there telling them, you have to do this? Or were you leading by example? See, when we look at these examples of youth ministry, right, the two that we had, right? Now, again, there's plenty of really good examples. No one ever talks about those, but we do need to talk about these bad examples. So whenever we see some nonsense, let me pull it up one time. Whenever we see some nonsense like this, we need to be able to say, okay, this guy probably not qualified, definitely should have never probably been in that position, but he had the right degree, and apparently he had the right people that, you know, that recommended him, or maybe he interviewed well. I don't have a clue. But, and I'm not trying to say whichever this church was, you know, that they didn't check the qualifications. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. But what we see from this, handing this out, isn't just an oversight. Especially if he made this sticker, it was far from an oversight. It's just immaturity. And I'm not saying it goes anywhere past this, right? This could be, people are jumping all over this post, assuming that, you know, they're like, check his hard drive, like whatever. I mean, you could assume the worst of people all day long. Best case scenario, he really did, like, he was just really trying to relate to kids, and he just is not very good at it, and not very good at using discernment, and not very good at knowing like what's appropriate and what's not. Right? That's best case scenario. Obviously, you can go down a road that's way worse than that, but let's assume best case scenario. So if that's best case scenario, and that's what's true, he made a judgment error, shouldn't have done it, that doesn't mean he gets to stay in an eldership role, because he's clearly shown that he's not qualified for it. Oftentimes, we miss the idea that, what's the verse? I can't remember if it's Titus or Timothy. Let me see where we go here. It's the Timothy passage. Let me pull that back up real quick. 1 Timothy chapter 3. So in 1 Timothy chapter 3, we have it, it says, if anyone aspires to be to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task, right? So if somebody desires it, there's going to be people that want to be an elder. They want to, you know, lead God's people, teach God's people, all of those things. And that's a good task. That's a noble task to pursue, but there's things that come with it and a lot of responsibility that does. Not only, right, not only are you going to stand before Jesus, like that is like really what should be in the back of any pastor's mind all the time. But the idea is that, like, not only do you need to have in your mind at all times, I am going to stand before the Lord one day and give account for the ministry that I have done as an elder. Not only that, you should be going through your mind saying, I'm going to be held accountable for that, the things I said, the things I did, the people, how I treated them, how I taught them. So when we have nonsense like this sticker, right? Again, best case scenario on the innocent level, or all the way to the other side of that news report we pulled up where 14 girls were abused, right? That's a problem. Clearly, that's a problem. So how do we avoid, as best we can, issues like this, problems like this, the smearing of Christ's name? You think that people, you could read the comments on that Twitter thread. People aren't excited to be a Christian or have any questions at all about Jesus or the life change he brings when they see things like that. Why? Because they go, well, they're like Paul when he writes to the Corinthians. He's like, even we don't do this nonsense. The people in the church are doing this. Even we don't do this. And you declare some sort of moral high ground. And in this case, they're right. They're right. In many cases, even the people outside the church don't do this. Now, again, some do, but the idea is the majority don't. So in this case, who should be an elder, right? If you're going to have a youth ministry, fine. Make that person a qualified elder via what we see in Scripture. Hold them accountable to that. If you have anybody in a leadership position as an elder, as a pastor that doesn't fit these qualifications, what are you doing? Like, you realize that you are blatantly disobeying Scripture. Like, you get that, right? Like, if you have people that are quarrelsome, like deliberately quarrelsome, purposely quarrelsome, it is their whole personality to be quarrelsome. Like, what are they doing in that position? Have they repented of that at all? Do you have people that are not just simply not hospitable? They are not going to have you over. They are not going to have anybody over. They're never going to have anybody over. Like, what are you doing? Hospitality is mentioned both times, Titus and Timothy. I would just encourage you guys, like, look this over. Look these passages over. I understand that lots of times it's really hard to find youth pastors or people to fill that position. I would argue that, first of all, that position it shouldn't even be there except for outreach to children that don't have Christian parents. In fact, if you're a Christian parent, you're the one that's supposed to be ministering to your kid, not divvying it off to somebody else. But if you do choose to do that model, which a lot of churches do, full disclosure, my church still does it, right? Still has a youth ministry, fine, whatever. But in that case, I'm not divvying off the teaching of my children to that person. I'm doing it as well. And if you're going to have somebody in that position, they should be a qualified elder. And if they're not, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're asking for nonsense like this to happen. Because maybe they're not self-controlled. Maybe they have no discipline whatsoever. What are they doing there? Just something to consider. Because what ends up happening is people are super surprised when something like this happens because they assumed that the person that was in that role was qualified to be in that role. Right? The one thing I want to end with is this one right here that the church sent out to whoever this individual was. They mentioned twice that they dealt with him according to their personal manual guidelines. I'm not sure what that means. Most churches, if you don't have, you should have some sort of church structure set up that if A happens, then B happens. So if somebody's found to have done something, you then follow up, right? So in many instances, like the story we showed at the beginning of the 14 girls that were abused, lots of times that was reported to the church, but the church didn't report it to the authorities, which is, I don't know why you wouldn't do that. But they didn't. So in this modern day and age, like this right here, we dealt with him according to the personnel manager, personal manual guidelines. And then down at the bottom, it says it again. We're dealing with him by our personal manual guidelines. Like your personal guidelines in your church should be set up with at the foundation of them, these qualifications. And if they're not, I don't know what you're doing. On top of that, during our modern age, every single person that is on staff, that includes elders and not, should have a background check done on them. If you have people working at your church or volunteering at your church and they are not background checked, you are asking for trouble. I know that you're probably like, well, I know him, I've known him forever. That's fine. Put that layer of protection there for yourself and for the kids. Get background checks done, guys. I don't know why you're not doing it. Do it. Do it for their safety. Why? Because if something ever were to happen, God forbid, you've done what you can do to make sure that those kids are protected. Because every time something like this happens, not only is the name of the church, this particular church, torn to pieces, but the name of Christ is besmirched. I don't know if anybody uses that word anymore, but there you go, just besmirched, right? People don't look favorably upon Jesus when this thing happens, which is why in almost all of Paul's letters, he's telling them, like, don't you realize that like you're living in a way that people outside the church see, and you're living just like them. But you're declaring that Christ gives you a new heart and a new mind, but you're living just like them. That being said, I want to end on a positive note. Like I said before, there are lots of youth pastors out there that do a really good job. They teach the word well, they lead their families well, and they lead their ministries well. They can defend doctrine, they teach doctrine. They are disciplined individuals, they are respectable, they are self-controlled. In those cases, please pray for those guys. Pray for them, encourage them, let you know that you're there for them, because it can be a role as an elder that really, really weighs on you. And to know that you have congregants praying for you that are keeping you in check, that know that you are trying your best to stay in line with the guidelines of Scripture, does a lot. You're going to see more stories like this, unfortunately. We always do. Every year there's either big, well-known people or like local yokels that do something stupid. But in every case, it can be pointed back to that they did not fit the qualifications for elder. Or their other elders did not keep them accountable to the qualifications for elder. Guys, like, I don't know how else to put it. If you follow what the scriptures say, things will go better for you. There's a reason that we have been gifted with what we've been gifted. Don't overlook it. It's there for our good and His glory. Guys, if you found this video helpful, we're going to end there. If you found this video helpful, make sure you leave a like. Make sure you share. If I said something you totally disagree with, totally fine. I get it. It happens like all the time. Leave a comment in this comment section below, and I will try to get there. I'm terrible at the comments, but go ahead and leave it anyway. And if you like more content like this, go ahead and check out some of the other videos we have on this channel. Again, I will link a lot of the ones I mentioned in the comment section or in the description below that you can check out later. Thank you guys for watching, liking, subscribing, all the cool things that you do. I'll talk to you later.